Hello, viewers. I'm your host, Kshitij Naik, and I welcome you all to our podcast conducted by the Free Legal Aid Club of MIT WPU School of Law. And today, we are here to discuss about violence. Not just any form of violence, but something that concerns 30 million women annually. We are here to discuss about pregnancy related violence. And to shed light on this topic, we have with us Ms. Prajakta Kakade from second year BBA LLB, who will be discussing with us the entire complexity of the issue at hand. And good afternoon, Prajakta. And to begin this discussion and to set a stage for the further questions, I would like to felicitate this discussion by taking some of your viewpoints on this issue. So, Prajakta, when we talk about pregnancy, people think of joy, family bonding, and new beginnings. But the reality is that many women experience control, coercion, and violence during this time. How would you define pregnancy related violence? And why do you think the society deliberately avoids acknowledging this form of abuse?
Okay, so let me get started on this. Pregnancy related violence is a much broad concept of crimes against women than most of the people think it is, because it covers physical violence as well as emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and many more things, also including economical abuse. All these kind of violence also include the procedures such as unsafe abortion and sex determining and sex based abortions as well. So all these things are the part of the concept of pregnancy related violence, because it is completely against the nature and the completely against women basically. So statistically speaking, in 2017, there was a research paper published by International Journal of Research in Medical Sciences. It basically showed that 3.9% of women in India annually get physically, verbally abused while they're pregnant. So when we talk about the data, approximately we can take as 1 million women annually get abused while being pregnant in India, which is very dehumanizing and completely against the principles of natural justice and the morality of human beings, right? Looking at this concept from a societal perspective, the society is very bound to think of all these things in a kafi in a kind of manner which is completely bound towards the family and the societal cultures and things like that. So everything, society makes everything about the reputation of the family and everything, rather than looking at these things from the perspective of a woman's well-being, which is morally completely wrong. So you know if the society, if a family acknowledges these kind of abuses and reports it to the court of law or to the police, what will happen is that it will get completely evidently proved in the society that even the so-called respectable institutions of marriage and family have the ability to violate the fundamental rights of the women of their families.
Okay. That's great to start and have given us the grounds to speak on the issue. Moving forward, Prajakta, I would like to bring it more to our to our Indian society. So in India, decision about pregnancy, like the very basis of pregnancy, that is decision about pregnancy, are often taken by husbands, in-laws, or extended family for that matter. Why do you think these reproductive choices are treated as a collective family decision instead of being recognized by a woman's personal right, or even for that is for her own body?
Okay, so all of these things are basically rooted in the orthodox thinking and the internalized misogyny, which is very bad for the Indian society. Indian society basically carries the idea that a woman's body is supposed to, carry the family's honor and the lineage, especially to reproduce the sons in the family. We all are aware of the gender discrimination, right? So the decisions related to pregnancy are more centric towards the family and the husband and the in-laws, rather than they should be centric towards the woman, because she is the one who is going to give birth to a child, right? So even though there are laws like Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971, uh, which basically give the woman a right to consent about the medical procedures that she is supposed to be undergo, but still the families and the society feel entitled over a woman's body. And one of the really dehumanizing aspect of this is that they take the woman's consent as negotiable rather than absolute, which is completely against the humanities and as well as the morality. Because like, you have to consider the fact that she is a grown up woman and she's consenting about something, but they just decide it cumulately. They just think of it as a family gathering rather than a woman's personal choice of life. So yeah.
Okay, okay. That has given me a perspective to think about. Moving forward, Prajakta, I would like to talk about abortion. The rights and the misconception and the control that is, surrounding towards it, around it. Sorry. So, Prajakta, despite the medical termination of pregnancy, that is the MTP Act, giving women the legal right to safe abortion, so many still face, social pressure, shame, or even forced continuance of unwanted pregnancies. Why is abortion, still seen as a moral issue instead of a healthcare right?
Yeah. So the basic sense of all these things about, like, the concept of moralities and like including the concept of morality over a woman's decision lies within the concept of log kya kahenge. I will basically get started on that. So the thing is that they think of a woman's body as if it was not her own, as if it was the society's to decide what to do, and what can she do, and things like that. Even if a woman consents about something, it is, as I mentioned earlier, the consent is considered to be negotiable rather than absolute. So which is a very messed up concept if you think about it. So when we talk about abortion, abortion is considered as apparently very sinful thing under the family cultures and the religious practices and things like that. So women, so what has happened throughout the years, that there has been a basic structure that has been set in the minds of women and the families overall, that abortion is a sinful thing. And all this stigma that women tend to have is because of the fear they have from the Indian society. Again, that I said, that log kya kahenge, uska jo dar rehta hai. So the fear that you feel like what you're doing is a crime. So women tend to hide all these things, which lead to unsafe abortion. And the data has shown that unsafe abortion actually leads to eight deaths per day in India, which is a very large.
That is a huge number. That is a huge number. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that is the whole concept boils down to the fact that they are not considering a woman's consent. They are shaming the woman for taking the doing the thing for of her own choice. So yeah, that is it.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh, Prajakta, this very answer, it actually leads me to the next question. That many women are forced to seek unsafe, illegal abortions due to stigma or family control. Why do you think? What do you think? Are the biggest barriers that prevent women from accessing safe, legal, and confidential abortion services?
Okay. So, what happens when a woman gets pregnant out of the wedlock? This whole situation is labeled as scandalous, and the woman is labeled as characterless. And in Indian society, labeling women, they have been doing this for a long time. They just like to blame a woman for every single thing. So a famous writer has said that just like compass points towards north, the man's blaming finger always points towards a woman, and that is very true. This the fear that a woman has because of pregnancy, especially out of the wedlock thing. So this fear and the stigma in her mind leads her to the unsafe abortions that, as I discussed before.
Yeah.
So mainly in Indian societies, there are two main reasons for the unsafe abortions. First is that the woman got pregnant unintentionally. So the couple was there, but the pregnancy was unintended. Second is usually the sex determining abortions, that we're all aware that under the PCPNDT Act, it is a crime to determine the sex of an unborn child. But it still happens in India under the sheets. We can't just, vanish all the crimes off. That is a very ideal situation, and it is very impossible to do. But that still happens, as I said. So, all these things lead to abortion of mainly a girl child, a unborn girl child. So these are the two main reasons for abortion. And the two main so the barriers that we are to discuss, the barriers are like the stigma and the fear, right? And the second thing is the unintended pregnancy, which might lead to the unsafe abortion. And then third thing might be the gender deciding, the sex deciding based abortions that happen in the nation, which are because of the orthodox thinking and more. And there's a more for it, there are more lot of barriers and things like that, but this is the basic thing that leads to the unsafe abortion.
That is a great perspective. So, as you have answered it, can you further elaborate, and can you explain how lack of awareness about the MTP Act, leads to manipulation? For example, husband refusing consent, families hiding medical risks, or clinical misleading clinical misleadings, to vulnerable women and all. So, about that.
Okay, okay. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to the lack of awareness in women due to lack of formal education as well as health-based literacy.
Yes,
So
yes.
all these things are mainly that these things happen mainly in the rural area, right? So there's the lack of formal education over there. We are all aware of the data, and
Hmm.
there's always the lack of health-based literacy in those places, right? So, from the basics, in 2021, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act was amended, and
Hmm.
the main provision that came into action in this amendment was that there's no need of the husband's consent in order for a woman to get her child aborted,
Okay,
which is
okay.
really important if you look at it.
Hmm.
But when it comes to rural areas, women are not aware of this particular amendment, right?
Correct,
So
correct.
there has to be proper awareness of the law and the statutes and things like that. What happens is that the husband misuses the lack of awareness and the lack of misinformation that a woman has, and then the woman gets kind of the fear and the stigma that abortion is illegal in India, and that I cannot abort my child even if I want to, because I need my husband's consent, and he won't give it to me, and things like that, because they're not aware of it. And it is really important, as law students and law practitioners, for us to spread the awareness regarding any kind of new gazette or new statutes that are upcoming in the nation, especially in the rural areas when it comes to women. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Prajakta. And now I believe it is. I mean, we have understood the entire stigma and the entire mindset around abortion, and I believe now it is time to discuss the other parallels that are, that we should uncover under this theme. Now, I would like to move to surrogacy. The exploitation and the empowerment that is required in it. So, Prajakta, my question would be again, surrogacy is often portrayed as empowering, but many surrogate mothers come from vulnerable backgrounds, right? And they face emotional, medical, and financial exploitation. So, from what you have seen, or what from your research, or from what you have understood, how aware are women about their rights when they enter commercial, or commercial surrogacy agreements? Yeah.
Yeah. So as you mentioned that most surrogates come from a very economically vulnerable background
Correct.
and like marginalized sections of the society. So they are forced to become surrogates because of the situations of debts and poverty and the pressure building from family. So this is what happens really. So the thing is that. Surrogacy is a very very broad concept, I will tell you.
Hmm.
So in 2021,
Yeah.
under the Surrogacy Regulation Act,
Yeah.
commercial surrogacy was banned.
Correct.
But as I mentioned earlier, everything that is banned in India still go on a much lesser degree, but it goes on
Goes
under the
on.
sheets, right?
Correct, correct,
So
correct.
this is still happening, but on a very lesser level. So that is a great improvement, but this should stop, because what happened in 2002 when the Surrogacy Regulation Act came into action now, uh, it was legal in India to have commercial surrogacies, and then India became a surrogacy hub. That's why in 2021 commercial surrogacy was banned in India. So now only the couples or the individuals can have the surrogates as their, surrogates and things like that. So when we talk about the rights of the surrogates, as I mentioned, that they come from a very marginalized part of the society. So again, there's a lack of awareness and lack of formal education, which leads them to believe, they're very innocent for the world and the tricks happening on them. So
Correct,
it
correct.
leads them to believe the fact that whatever the other party is saying, they must be correct. They are thinking right for us, right? So they sign the contract without the proper legal formalities. They don't have an advocate for them, because they're put
Again, the
a,
social
yeah,
marginality.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're put the contract in front of them, and they're put the pen to sign it, or the fingerprint or the thumbprint they used to take, the consent for the surrogacy thing. So the legal formalities are also not proper happening in the surrogate thing overall. And when it comes to surrogates, they have no to little say, honestly, about their own bodily autonomy. They are treated as if it's not their own body, as if it's a rented womb or something like that. They have no consent when to have C-section, or how much proper compensation that they are to get, because the couples, individuals, and under the sheets happening a commercial surrogacy, they tend to exploit the surrogate women for the money, because they are not aware properly of the whole situation, of the whole background. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Prajakta. Actually, your answer was so accurate that you have to an extent actually answered my next question as well. So it was actually about do you think the society objectifies surrogate mothers as service providers, which you actually did, and rather than recognizing them as women undergoing a life-altering medical process. How damaging is this mindset? As you yes, shed light over it, if you may add something to
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So the whole process of considering surrogate mother as, just a rented womb or service providers, this whole process is very dehumanizing. They are, they're women. They hold the rights of a country. If surrogate mothers are just treated as service providers and rented womb, this is against their right to equality mentioned under Article 14 of Indian Constitution, and right to life and personal liberty mentioned under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So this basically violates their own fundamental rights, as well as it is morally wrong and dehumanizing for the women, because what she is doing half of the times, actually most of the times, surrogate women are forced into that particular business. They are, they have to do it because they come from such a poor background and economically vulnerable background, that they have left no other option rather than to perform surrogacy for people, right? So they shouldn't be exploited, and they should not be treated as just, womb on rent and, service providers, because that is actually, when I say this, people might think that this is a very harsh thing to say, but believe me, when these things happen with those women, it is much dehumanizing.
It is.
So
It is heart
actually we
wrenching.
have to
Yeah,
speak
yeah.
up at least for
It
the
is. It is heart
situations.
wrenching
Yeah.
actually. To even to listen to all of this, it is difficult to digest it as a fact. Prajakta, moving forward, now I would like to shift our discussion to the other level, and it is about forced sterilization, right? Which is hidden but common, right? So, Prajakta, forced sterilization is rarely spoken about, right? But it continues in subtle forms. A woman being sterilized during C-sections without consent, husbands pressuring wives for family planning, or health workers manipulating rural women, etc. Why has this violation of bodily autonomy remained invisible for so long? And after, I mean, why is it invisible? And are there any solutions that you would like to propose on?
Okay. So we can basically put light on the fact that during emergency in the year of 1975 and 77, this whole, forced sterilization thing basically was, commonly started in India. It was basically, first of all, it was in the start of the forced sterilization processes. It was mainly on the male population, but after it, received backlash and hatred for it, because the forced sterilization, basically non-consensual, right? So this is violative of their Article 14 and 21 again. So after it forced backlash, the forced sterilization started to happen on the women of the country. Okay, so this is again, as I've mentioned several times before, this is again very dehumanizing for the women of our country. So what happens is now that all the as I mentioned before, that a woman's consent is understood as a negotiable term rather than an absolute term, which is a very messed up thing, as I mentioned before as well. So there are few examples of it, that during C-section, medical procedures are performed on women related to the sterilization without even asking their clear consent. They just ask the family, and the family actually forces the medical practitioner to perform that particular surgery on her so that she can be forcefully sterilized. So that is a really messed up thing, because they don't even take a woman's consent into consideration. And sterilization in general causes a lot of health issues in women as well. So unless and until it is absolutely necessary for a woman's body to get sterilized, it is a very problematic thing to do, for sterilization and things like that. So as I've mentioned before, the society, mainly the family, the husbands and the in-laws, think of a woman's body as if it was not her own. They think of it as, as if it was some sort of family gathering and something we get to decide what to do
Yeah,
and
yeah,
things
yeah.
like that, right?
Completely, completely.
So they just consent on the fact that yes, we want her to get sterilized and things like that. There could be many reasons, like if the family is not financially stable enough to have another child, so they might get the woman sterilized. A few solutions regarding to that could be that the doctors could not come under the coercion. They could report if a family is forcing them, if a family is negatively forcing the doctors to perform sterilization on a woman without her consent. What they can do is they actually can report that particular thing, because forced sterilization is completely against the morals as well as the fundamental rights of a woman, right? So it is violative of fundamental rights, so it's easy to report as well. And the doctors and everyone can actually try to spread the awareness in the women that this is something that is very risky. These things might happen. If you don't want, just if you give your consent that no, I don't want this, medical practitioners would most probably will not be able to violate that thing, because that might result in them getting debarred from the medical institutions, right? So they can do that as well, because if someone is forcing you to do something heinous, you can also try your best to protect yourself from that thing. So awareness is extremely important.
Correct, correct. So that is the integral part of it, exactly. So now I would like to pose a short question. I mean, I believe it is something, it doesn't come up that much, but can you like shortly explain us about the intimate partner violence during pregnancy? So the question that I would like to pose is, how important it is for pregnant women to know that they can seek protection under the Domestic Violence Act, even if they don't want to leave the marriage. And largely speaking, why are women not opening about this?
Yeah, so basically, what happens is that Domestic Violent Act was basically the act basically came into action in order to safeguard the women from the violence that they are facing from the men of their families, right? So the problem here is again lack of awareness. This is actually what happens in the Indian society, that there is lack of awareness because of lack of formal education and everything like that. So there has to be awareness based programs, and if a woman is aware of Domestic Violence Act, she can report, she can seek safety, and there can be some sort of restraining orders. If, for example, if she doesn't want to leave the marriage, because she has a kid and things like that, many societal pressures are actually created on a woman if she wants to get divorced as well. So if she doesn't want to leave marriage, so what she can do is she can uh, prove the side of her so well that her husband might receive a restraining order on her. So these things can happen, and she can actually be protected from the physical, mental, sexual violence that she has been facing for so long. So this is the one thing that they can actually do. And when we talk about why do women are not able to speak up now, most of the things, boil down to the concept of manipulation and understanding the family's honor and things like that. So women are actually taught that, and they actually think that, and the families and the husbands and the in-laws, they actually think that a woman's body is the reason why family's honor and the lineage exists, right? So a woman actually thinks, a woman is actually taught to adjust for the baby and adjust for the family. At least don't disrespect our family values and things like that. So they are expected to they actually expect women to get disrespected from the men, but they want the woman to not disrespect the family matters, which are actually dehumanizing her, which is so messed up when you look at it. So women are actually not able to speak up also because of this, and then they're financially and emotionally manipulated, that if you kind of speak up about this, so we might actually leave you, and you will be stranded and things like that. When we talk about financial accountability, what happens is that when we talk about the rural area specifically, women are not independent, and it's not their complete fault that they are not independent. They are not made to be independent. That's what they are not as a properly taught that you can actually be independent, you can actually live your own life. They live in a stigma of the society that what I do is everything, what I have to do is for my family and things like that. So they actually get manipulated from the men of the family, emotionally and financially manipulated.
uh, that is actually something to actually sit and think about. And Prajakta, as you also earlier mentioned about the PCPNDT Act, right? So that brings me to the question about female feticide and parental gender screening, right? So despite a strict laws like the PCPNDT Act, illegal gender testing still happens, right? Why do you think the demand continues so strongly in certain communities? Is it purely patriarchal, or also economical and social pressures are there? And does this result into discrimination beginning even before birth? So what is your take about it?
Yeah, so let me emphasize on this. The full form of the act that you basically mentioned is Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act 1994. So, this act basically came into action to ban the sex determining procedure that happens in a hospital or a clinic. So, mainly talking about states like Haryana, Rajasthan, UP, and the states which are some sort of socially backward other than other states. So what happens is, this is literally the ground zero situation, and I'm pretty sure that most of the people are aware of it. They determine the sex of the child, sex of the unborn child, and then they force the woman to get an abortion if the child is a girl. So this basically proves that the girl child is facing a gender discrimination even before getting born in the world, right? So even though this particular act provides safety towards women, and it basically bans the sex determining procedures of an unborn child, but as I mentioned earlier, many of the medical procedures specifically happen under the sheets, and they have to be stopped. We can't just go like, no, 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 we can't control things that are happening. We're not there. There's too much political pressure or too much societal pressure, and everything is, they might also disguise all these things as population control, but that is not the truth. They just kill off the girl who is unborn, which is completely discriminatory. And I don't even know, this is so heinous and dehumanizing for a person, because again the woman is getting forced into an abortion yet again. I will tell you what happens in India is that the woman is actually threatened that if you give birth to another girl child, we might leave you stranded and your another children's as well. So if a woman gets to know that she's pregnant with a girl child, she tries to use the self-determined what we call as abortion procedures, as well as unsafe abortion procedure. This is the fear and stigma which leads her to use the unsafe abortion procedures. And So what happens again is that she disguises all these things as medical problems and medical issues, but that is actually the unsafe procedure behind behind the scene.
That is
So that
concerning.
is very scary for a woman.
Then Prajakta, I mean, as you have mentioned the problems, in short, in like for the easy understanding of the viewers, can you tell about any, the legal rights and the practical protections in a simple way that the viewers can actually inculcate in their life?
Yeah. So what happens is that the sex determining procedures might not even happen intentionally. If a doctor is performing sonography and a person is smart enough to understand what is the sex of a child, so they might just go go and perform the further abortion if they want to. So the doctors can actually in when we talk about the rural areas, again the doctors and the legal practitioners can spread awareness regarding this, and regarding how if you get to know about the gender or the sex of a unborn child, it's actually a crime. So if a person is threatened with the fact that what I was going to do, that sex determining procedure, that is actually a crime. So I must not do it now, I might be in danger. So at least they are, in that kind of force, but law is made to regulate these kind of
Correct,
thinking
correct.
and like that, right? So they have to spread awareness regarding this is actually a crime, because I will tell you what the ground zero situation again is, that the women of the families actually are not aware of the fact that sex determining procedures are crime. They're not at all aware of that, because again lack of formal education and health based literacy, right? So yeah.
So that is, I mean, that is the entire understanding of it, and I believe the law is strong enough, and we believe we need further, amendments to make it more strong, and to safeguard pregnant women and the violence, and we need to stop the violence happening against them. I would say that Prajakta, it is more of, and I guess you will add to it that it is more about the mindset that exists over here, right? And as you have again and again pointed about, it is the mindset that is concerning the entire issue. So the larger problem is we should we should challenge the mindset, and then only this will come to an end.
Yes, agreed, completely agreed.
Okay, so I mean, that is somewhere that brings us to the end of our discussion. Thank you so much, Prajakta, for shedding light on such an important issue, something that concerns a lot of women, concerns majorly every woman, right? So thank you for shedding light over this. I genuinely believe that this podcast is going to help a lot of women out there in every part of the country, and it was something that had to be discussed on the table, and had to reach a lot of people. So thank you once again. Thank you, viewers, for patiently listening to us, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.